great men in history, but Sir Ernest Shackleton, by any measure, was one of the greatest, along with Scott and Amundsen, one of the legendary polar explorers.
Well, on the left is the leader, my grandfather, Ernest Shackleton, the boss, and to the right is his number 2, Wild.
His granddaughter, Lady Alexandra Shackleton, never met him. He died long before she was born, but what he achieved has loomed large throughout her life.
He wasn't perfect. I'm not one of these sort of ancestor worshippers. He wasn't perfect, but he was a very great man. I think it was innate. He just knew what he ought to do. But of course, in that era, if you had a job that required leadership, you expect to be able to lead. Leadership in those days was not a learnt self-conscious skill. It grew out directly how sort of person you were, for better or worse, really.
Shackleton joined the Royal Naval Reserve in 1901 as a sub-lieutenant. In 1907, on his Nimrod expedition, he led his men to within 100 miles of the South Pole. 8 years later, he returned aboard his ship Endurance, his aim to make the first crossing of Antarctica from coast to coast. This remarkable film, shot by cameraman Frank Hurley, provides an amazing record of what would become an incredible story of human survival. After sailing into the Weddell Sea, Shackleton's ship became trapped in pack ice. The crew spent 8 months marooned on board, all efforts to free her failing.
I think my grandfather's leadership came out after Endurance was stuck in the ice. He didn't repine. He wrote in his diary, a man must set himself to a new mark, directly the old man goes. He told his men just simply he'd get them home. And so his 28 men believed him.
Squeezed by thousands of tons of ice, Endurance was crushed. The crew abandoned ship and for the next 5 months camped on the ice, watching as she was slowly destroyed before sinking into the depths of the Weddell Sea. Shackleton had hand-picked his crew. Some of his choices were unorthodox, but the team he assembled proved to be remarkable.
He chose Hussey, was a huge success, because he thought he looked funny, and he was funny. He kept everyone amused. And when they abandoned the ship and had only allowed to take 2 pounds of weight, Hussey thought he'd have to leave his banjo behind. But Ernest Shackleton said, no, it's vital mental medicine. And so and it was, though they got a bit tired of his 6 tunes.
With no chance of rescue, Shackleton and his men set off, dragging 3 small lifeboats across the ice, then sailing to Elephant Island, 350 miles away. Leaving the bulk of his crew behind, the explorer and a handful of companions set off again, navigating their 22-foot boat, the James Caird, to South Georgia, a momentous 800-mile voyage.
Worsley, the brilliant navigator who found South Georgia, that was an enormous achievement. It would be very easy for this little boat to have missed South Georgia, gone straight out of the Atlantic, and never be heard of again. And he only got a few sightings of the sun during that whole time. Worsley wrote of the boat journey, when Ernest Shackleton kept an eagle eye on all of us. If anyone was failing, he would order hot milk, not just for him, but for everybody. So this man wouldn't feel, I'm the only person not coping. That's what I call instinctive leadership.
After 16 days at sea and suffering terrible thirst, the men landed on South Georgia. To reach the whaling station on the other inhabited side of the island, Shackleton and his men had to scale a glacier. None of them were mountaineers, and their equipment was basic.
Then they knew that if they were in the right place, they were near the Stromness whaling station. So they would hear the whistle calling the whalers to work. So they waited, must have seen a very long quarter of an hour. Then they heard what Ernest Shackleton described as the sweetest music human ear ever heard. It was the sound of the whistle.
Shackleton and his men had miraculously survived, and after 4.5 months on Elephant Island, his remaining crew were also eventually rescued.
And at 4 attempts, Ernest Shackleton retrieved his men from Elephant Island. Not a man was lost.
The men's remarkable tale of survival made them celebrities, and Frank Hurley's film captures the huge welcome that awaited them in Chile as they made their way home. Shackleton headed for Antarctica again in 1921, but died from a heart attack aged 47 in South Georgia, the scene of his greatest escape, and where he still lies today, a truly legendary figure from an extraordinary age of polar exploration. Simon Newton, Forces News, London. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel.